Hello, Miguel from Grumo here, and I'm analyzing my one-handed backhand versus Federer's. And in this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of things I'm doing wrong, actually 7 things that I'm doing wrong, and one thing that arguably I am better at than Federer. Now, to give you some context, I started to play tennis seriously 6 months ago. And so I'm comparing myself with one of the top tennis players of all time, Roger Federer, who just retired recently, unfortunately, and who happens to have one of the best and most beautiful and fluid one-handed backhands in the history of tennis. Also, for context, I am 45 years old, so I'm also older than most people starting playing tennis, and I'm also shorter than most tennis players at 5'6.5". I'm 7 inches shorter than Federer. That's 18 centimeters shorter. And the day that I was recording this with my tennis ball machine was 10 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 Fahrenheit degrees, or 50 Fahrenheit degrees, and versus probably much warmer a day. Also, I'm using a 15-year-old Wilson racket that has new strings at 40 pounds of tension, and it's a big piece of crap. But anyways, it works. And the only thing I think it has in common with Roger Federer's racket is that is from the same brand, Wilson. Other than that, nothing else is the same. All right, so could you guess? Now, let's say that you're somebody has played tennis for many years, or you're a coach. What are the 7 things that I am doing wrong by looking at a loop video of me hitting a forehand at 60 frames per second? And let me just play it a few more times. There you go. So it's a solid one-handed backhand. By the way, I'm the one in the left, just if it was not obvious. All right. What do you see here that is wrong? There's 7 things. Okay. So the first thing, and this is why it's so important to record yourself, by the way, because if you see yourself in real time or somebody sees you in real time, unless they have an amazing eye, it's not very obvious what's going wrong. You have to go frame by frame. So the first thing I see here that is wrong is the distance between my body and the racket is a lot longer than Federer's. I don't know if this makes a huge difference, but it's quite obvious that when he's getting ready, the racket is a lot closer to his head, and mine is a lot further. Okay, so that is one thing. Number one. Number two is that when I do the take back of the racket, what we can see here clearly is that my elbow is a lot lower than Federer's. Again, I'm not sure if this makes a huge difference, but it's obvious that there is a tremendous difference there. And I'm not saying that Federer's way of hitting a one-handed backhand is the only way in the world. I'm just comparing my backhand from a beginner to a professional. Imagine the point of contact, and what do you do at the point of contact is the most important thing. What happens before and after, it could be slightly different, but obviously here is I'm just pointing out the major differences. You can see my elbow is much lower here. And that's the second thing. The third thing is that you can see how while he is doing the take back, Federer's take back, his racket is close. It's pointing more towards, I guess, the front of the court, whereas mine is already pointing kind of to the back of the court. Again, I'm not sure if this makes a huge difference, but it's an obvious difference that you only can see when you play this in slow motion. And if anybody has experience and could give me any feedback in the comments, I would much appreciate it to see if any of these differences actually make a difference, because I'm going to try to model, like many people, my one-handed backhand after Federer. So I want to make sure I'm copying or replicating the things that actually make sense. So I don't know if this makes sense, whether that is pointing back or forward does make a big difference or not. Okay, so the fourth thing is that I drop the racket too early. So you can see that And by the way, this is time or synchronized based on the point of contact, right? So that's what the reference that I'm used to synchronize these two hits, okay? So the other thing is that I am taking down, so I'm dropping my racket much earlier than Federer. So you see how much lower my racket is here. So I started to take my racket back down or dropping it much earlier than Federer. Federer at that same instant still has the racket very high over his head and shoulder. And I already started like to swing this thing, right? Imagine this is typical for beginners. You want to start swinging earlier because you feel more comfortable, that you're not trying to rush to the last minute your swing. I'm not sure, but it's an obvious difference. And this is also going to affect my ability to accelerate, I think, because I'm dropping the racket slowly. And you can see how Federer here, once he starts dropping it, it drops faster than my racket, okay? But before I go into that problem itself, let me just talk about a problem that I know and I've heard from many coaches. It's very typical among beginners, and it has to do with when the left hand is released from the throat of the racket. And we can see I release it about this height, so let's say about the mid torso side, and then when I swing, I'm basically swinging, making the blunt of the swing or most of the swing without the hand attached to the throat of the racket, okay? And I think this is a big no-no. And the reason why is because you lose stability. You're basically asking your arm to do all the effort here, right? Which it does because it's a one-handed backhand. But as you can see here, most professionals, if not all professionals, they will release the throat of the racket from their left arm or non-dominant arm at much lower at the hip area, right? And if we can see here, I'm releasing the racket much higher around here, right? And I think that makes a difference in terms of stability. The left arm is allowing you to guide the racket to the point of contact with more accuracy. If you release your left hand, in my case, left hand because I'm right-handed, too early, that means you're swinging without that help, without that guidance, right? So that is a mistake number 5. So let's go for mistake number 6. Can you guess what it is? I think this is debatable, but when I swing, I really start the acceleration there, the hardcore acceleration here, okay, at this point, when the racket is already low at this moment, okay? That means I have to accelerate from 0 to the maximum speed from here to there. That's all I have, right? Federer, you notice that he started his swing much later, which means he's going to accelerate from a higher position, right? So look at this. See if we can see this. It's tricky to see, but look, he's going to drop the racket. He's accelerating there, much higher, and then he hits the ball. I think it's more obvious. Maybe here, you can see how I'm already almost pointing back to the fence, and he is pointing almost to the side, which means he's going to have to accelerate much faster from here to there. So by that time, he's already accomplished quite a bit of racket speed, which he can use. So basically, he's accelerating longer, and I'm accelerating for a shorter amount of time. And this, you'll notice this because I kind of like snap, whereas it feels a lot more fluid if you start the acceleration from higher up, right? So I don't know if you can tell that when you play it at real speed. It's very hard to tell, but I think that makes a huge difference because if I were to start accelerating around there, then I would have much time to accelerate from 0 to maximum speed versus starting around here. We're talking tenths of a second of difference. but the whole swing happens in less than half a second. So any minor differences in the swing timing translate to major differences on the results. Although at the end of the day, well, the shot is good. It has top spin, quite a bit of speed. So I'm not saying this is a bad shot. I'm just saying that I was able to notice 7 differences that only are obvious once you play this in slow motion, right? The 7th error is that on the follow through, you could argue that my arm is a little bit low. His arm is higher, in a higher angle, but also this ball was bouncing higher. This is one of the disadvantages of being shorter, is that it's harder to hit balls around the nice area, which is the between the waist and the torso, just because this distance is shorter if you're shorter, right? So you have to move a lot more to be able to hit balls at the sweet spot. So which happens many times, you end up hitting balls at a higher point, right? And you can see he's hitting it around the ideal level, and mine is a little bit higher, which I think affects your follow through. So that is my take on the 7 things that I could improve. Again, just to recap, it's that my racket, it's too far apart at the beginning. The elbow seems to be very low here on the take back. The racket is pointing back, not front. I released the left hand too early, right? And the racket acceleration starts happening a little bit too late. So it's not a fluid motion. And the left arm extends too low. So other than that, the only thing I really can arguably say that is better than Federer is this. That's it.